Even in a world of cold machines, there is an eternal spark of humanity that can never be extinguished or replaced. We find the stories that light up the darkness and turn them into cinematic masterpieces. Subscribe today and explore the infinite nature of the human flame.
My father looked straight through me at his retirement dinner and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "She's not on the program. She can handle the coats." That was it. No seat at the family table. My name wasn't in the program, not in the acknowledgments, not in the thank you speech my brother had spent 3 weeks preparing. I had driven 4 hours to be there. I was standing in the hotel lobby in the dress I'd bought specifically for that night, and my father's solution was to point me toward the coat check station near the entrance. My sister-in-law caught my eye from across the lobby. She smiled the way people smile when they think they've won something. "We only reserved seats for family," she said quietly, adjusting the corsage on her wrist. "People who were actually involved." My brother didn't look up from his phone. So I stood there and I let them think what they'd always thought. What they didn't know was that the guest of honor for the evening, the woman my father had been trying to meet for 8 months, had personally asked me to be there, not as a guest. As her counterpart, 30 minutes later, she walked through those lobby doors, bypassed my father completely, put both her hands around mine and said, "Finally, my team has been talking about you for months. Are you ready to get started?" The entire room went still. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. My father retired from 32 years in commercial real estate on the second Saturday of October. The kind of career where you know everyone in the room, and everyone in the room, and everyone in the room owes you something. He had built his reputation the slow way, deal by deal, handshake by handshake, and he wore that reputation like a second skin. The retirement dinner was at the Whitmore Hotel downtown. The kind of place with chandeliers that cost more than my first car and waitstaff who never once make eye contact unless you want them to. I had not been invited to help plan any of it. My brother had handled everything. He and his wife had been living 15 minutes from my parents for the past 6 years, collecting what I can only describe as proximity points, the slow accumulation of credit that comes from simply being present, being at Sunday dinners, being the one who drove mom to her cardiology appointments, being available in a way that I, living in another state, building something in near total silence, could never quite be. I wasn't bitter about it. I understood the math. What I didn't understand until that night was how completely they had written me out. I found out about the dinner through my mother, who texted me a week before with the venue name and time and nothing else. "No, we'd love for you to come. No, can you make it? Just the information," offered the way you'd share a forwarded calendar invite with a coworker who asked. I responded that I'd be there. She replied with a thumbs up emoji. I drove up that Friday night and checked into a hotel a few blocks away. I didn't stay at the house, hadn't for years. That particular door had closed so gradually that none of us had ever formally acknowledged it. The dinner itself started at 7. I arrived at 6:45 wearing the dark green dress and walked into the lobby to find my brother managing the seating chart near the entrance. He looked surprised to see me, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously my confirmation text had been taken. "Hey," he said, "you actually came. I told Mom I would." "Yeah." He glanced down at the clipboard. "Thing is, we kind of finalized the table arrangements already." "How many people?" 42. "It's a set menu, so." He shrugged in the particular way he had perfected over 40 years of shrugging. The shrug that meant, "This is awkward but not my problem." His wife appeared from somewhere near the flower arrangement. She had the focused energy of someone who had been planning this evening for months and considered it a personal achievement. She looked at me the way you look at a problem you thought you'd already solved. "There are some folding chairs in the corridor," she said, not unkindly. "Or honestly, the coat check area is right there. They could use an extra set of hands. It gets busy once people start arriving." I looked at her. I looked at the coat check station. I looked at my brother, who was studying the seating chart with the concentration of a man defusing a bomb. My father came through the side hallway at that moment. He was wearing the navy suit my mother had picked out, and he had the look of a man who was deeply satisfied with himself and his life choices. He saw me and paused. "Oh, good," he said. "You're here." Then he looked at my sister-in-law. Is she on the program? There wasn't really a slot. She can handle the coats, he said. It's right there. He moved on. Someone else needed his attention. Someone who was actually in the program. I didn't say anything. I never said anything. And that had always been the problem. I had spent my entire life in this family being the one who didn't escalate, who absorbed things quietly and filed them away, who kept the peace in a way that everyone around me had mistaken for indifference or weakness or consent. I found a spot near the edge of the lobby, beside a tall planter that blocked me from the main sightline, and I sent a single text message, "I'm here, lobby. Whenever you're ready." The reply came back in under a minute. "Coming in now." 10 minutes, maybe less. I put my phone away and waited. My father had spent 8 months trying to get a meeting with Delia Marsh. She was the founder and managing director of Marsh Capital Partners, a real estate investment firm that had reshaped 2 mid-sized cities in the past decade. She didn't do ribbon cuttings. She didn't attend chambers of commerce luncheons. She was, in my father's world, the kind of person you spent a career hoping to be in the same room with. He had sent 3 letters through his firm. He had asked mutual contacts to make introductions. He had, according to my mother, mentioned her name at least once a week for the past year. What he didn't know was that Delia Marsh was my mentor. We had met 4 years earlier at a development conference in Nashville, in the way that truly important relationships sometimes begin, by accident, over bad coffee, in a conversation that neither of us planned to have for more than 5 minutes. I had just started my own boutique development consulting practice. I was 28 years old and I was scared out of my mind, and I was pretending very hard not to be. She saw through it immediately. She also saw something else. She started referring small projects my way, then larger ones. Then she brought me in as a structural consultant on a major mixed-use development in Charlotte that ended up getting covered in 3 national trade publications. Over 4 years, quietly and without fanfare, she had become the most important professional relationship of my life. And I had become, in her words, the sharpest operational mind I've worked with in 20 years. My family knew I worked in real estate consulting. That was the extent of what they knew, because that was the extent of what they'd ever asked. When Delia's firm had started seriously pursuing a new acquisition in my father's region, a portfolio of commercial properties that my father's own company had been peripherally involved in, she had called me and said, "I think I'm going to finally have a reason to meet your father." I hadn't told him. I kept asking myself why not, and the answer, when I was honest with it, was simple. I wanted to see what happened. Not as punishment, as information. I needed to see what they would do when they didn't know I was watching. I had been collecting data on my own family for 30 years. I wanted one clean, controlled experiment. That night at the Whitmore Hotel was my controlled experiment. Delia came through the main entrance at 7:02 with 2 members of her acquisitions team behind her. She was 54 and moved the way people move when they have never once in their adult lives worried about whether they belonged in a room. She scanned the lobby once, found me immediately, and walked over. "Nora," she said, using my name the way she always did, like it was a straightforward fact about the world. "Hi. Your father's here? He's in the private dining room." She nodded. Then she put both hands around mine. It was something she did, a 2-handed handshake that always felt more like punctuation than greeting, and said, loud enough for the front half of the lobby to hear clearly, "Finally, my team has been talking about you for months. Are you ready to get started?" I became aware of my brother's presence before I saw him. I had peripheral vision for him by now, the way you develop peripheral vision for anything you've had to navigate around your whole life. He was standing 6 feet away with the clipboard still in his hands, and his face had done something complicated. "I'm ready," I said. "Good. I want to introduce you to a few people before we sit down." She glanced toward the dining room corridor. "I understand your father is the guest of honor tonight?" "He is." "Lovely. I've been trying to get in front of him for months, actually. The Harrison portfolio overlap. His firm has some pieces we need to discuss." She paused, noticing something over my shoulder. "Is that him?" I turned. My father had come back into the lobby to collect a few late arrivals. He saw Delia Marsh, and I watched the recognition move across his face, the slow, almost disbelieving recognition of a man who has wanted something for a very long time and is suddenly looking directly at it. Then he looked at me, then at Delia, then at me again. You know each other, he said. It wasn't quite a question. Nora is one of my closest collaborators, Delia said pleasantly. I should have made this introduction years ago. My fault entirely. She smiled. Happy retirement, by the way. I've heard wonderful things about the Harrison work. My father's mouth opened and closed once. My brother was still holding the clipboard. My sister-in-law had appeared from somewhere near the corridor entrance, and she was wearing the expression of someone who has just realized that the piece of furniture they've been using as a step-stool is actually an antique. The dinner proceeded. I was given a seat at the main table. Not the folding chair, not the coat check station. The main table between Delia and one of her senior acquisition leads, across from my father, who spent the first 40 minutes of the meal being extremely polite and carefully not looking at me. My brother sat at the far end. His wife had found a place sitting near the window that put her at a slight diagonal from the main conversation. She didn't say much for the rest of the evening. Delia was there to talk business, and she did, with the easy directness of someone who doesn't see social occasions and professional occasions as different categories. She spoke about the Harrison portfolio. She spoke about the regional expansion. She mentioned my name 4 times in the span of 30 minutes, not to be pointed about it, just because I was genuinely relevant to what she was describing. At some point, my father leaned across the table and said quietly, "How long have you known her?" 4 years, I said. He was quiet for a moment. She's been trying to reach my firm for most of that time. I know. Why didn't you? You never asked what I was doing, Dad. He looked at his water glass. He turned at once on the tablecloth. I thought you were doing small projects, he said. Consulting. Startup stuff. I was, and then it grew. How much? I told him. Not to wound him, just because he'd asked, and it was the truth, and I'd spent enough years editing the truth to make people comfortable. He didn't respond immediately. A waiter appeared to clear the salad plates, and my father sat back and let that happen, and by the time the waiter left, his expression had shifted into something I didn't quite have a name for. It wasn't shame, exactly. It was more like the look of a man rereading a document he thought he understood and finding that the words had rearranged themselves into something entirely different. After dinner, my sister-in-law found me near the dessert table. I had no idea, she said. Her voice had the quality of something carefully assembled, like she was building the sentence as she spoke it, checking each word before placing it down. About your work. About Delia Marsh. You assumed I was struggling, I said. Not unkindly. Just clearly. She absorbed that. Your brother tried to ask your mother about it once, and she said you were figuring things out. I was figuring things out, I said. I figured them out. She nodded. She started to say something else and then stopped. For the first time in 6 years of knowing her, she seemed to have run out of the particular currency she usually traded in. The smooth reframings, the graceful repositionings, the ability to make any situation feel like it had been her idea all along. I'm sorry about the coat check thing, she said finally. It came out blunter than I think she intended. Thank you, I said. I meant it. It wasn't nothing. My brother found me near the exit of the end of the night. He'd had 2 glasses of wine and his tie was loosened, and he looked like a man who had been quietly processing something difficult for several hours. You should have told us, he said. Maybe, I said. But you never asked. That's not fair. It might not be, but it's what happened. I looked at him. He was 3 years older than me, and I had spent most of my childhood following him around, wanting his approval with a desperation I was only now, in my early 30s, starting to understand and let go of. When's the last time you called me and asked how things were going? Not around the holiday. Not because Mom mentioned something, just because you wanted to know. He thought about it honestly. That was one thing about my brother. When he was cornered by something true, he didn't usually try to fight his way out of it. He just went quiet. I don't remember, he said. That's the answer, I said. I didn't say it with anger. I had thought, driving up that Friday, that I might feel angry during some part of this weekend. I didn't particularly. What I felt instead was a kind of tired clarity, the way you feel after a long illness finally breaks, wrung out but also clean. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, I said. I just want us to actually know each other. Do you think that's still possible? I considered that. I think it's possible if you want it to be. He nodded. We stood there in the hotel exit for another moment. Then he said, Delia Marsh, though, come on. I laughed despite myself. I know. How did that even happen? Bad coffee in Nashville and a 45-minute conversation I thought was going to be 5 minutes. He shook his head slowly. I'll call you, he said. Not around a holiday. I took the drive back to my hotel slowly, through streets that were still mine even though I hadn't lived here in 7 years. The city looked the same. The distance between me and my family looked different. The next morning, my father called. He didn't start with an apology. He wasn't that kind of man, and I had made peace with that long enough ago that I no longer needed him to be. He started with a question about the Harrison portfolio, which was, for him, a kind of opening, the way some people clear their throat before they say the thing they actually want to say. We talked for 40 minutes, about the deal, first. Then, cautiously, about other things. He asked a question about my firm's current projects. I answered it. He asked a follow-up question. I answered that too. It was the longest unguarded conversation we'd had in at least 5 years, and we were both aware of that fact without mentioning it. Your mother always said you were the stubborn one, he said at some point. I think I understand now what she meant by that. How did she mean it? Like it was a problem. A pause. I think she was wrong about that. It wasn't much. But it was honest, and honest was more than I'd been getting. Delia called me that afternoon to debrief on the dinner. She had, she said, found my father perfectly decent in person, more uncertain than she'd expected. She asked how things were going with the family end of things, in the careful way she had of asking personal questions, leaving plenty of room for me to not answer if I didn't want to. It's a start, I said. That's usually all you get, she said. Starts. She wasn't wrong. 3 weeks later, my mother called. It was a Thursday afternoon. No occasion, no holiday proximate. I almost didn't recognize the rhythm of it at first. A call with no immediate purpose, no logistical reason behind it. I've been thinking, she said, without preamble, about how we handled things. The retirement dinner. Okay, I said. I want to say, she stopped. My mother was not a woman who said difficult things easily. She had navigated her entire adult life by smoothing over difficult things until they became flat and hard and eventually invisible. I want to say that I didn't know about the extent of your work. And I've been trying to figure out whether that's your fault or mine. It's probably both, I said. She was quiet a moment. I think it might be more mine, she said. I sat with that. It was, as my father's conversation had been, imperfect, incomplete, a beginning rather than a resolution. But there was something in it that I had not heard from her before. Not the polished warmth she deployed at family dinners, not the gentle redirection she used when conversations got uncomfortable. Something real. I'd like to have lunch, she said, when you're in town next, just the two of us. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. My sister-in-law took longer. She was a woman who had invested heavily in a particular version of our family story, the version where she was essential and I was peripheral, and revising that investment was not something she could do quickly or gracefully. I didn't hold it against her. People protect the stories that protect them. What I noticed over the months that followed was that the small acts of exclusion stopped. My name started appearing in group texts that had previously not included me. When my brother mentioned, offhandedly, that my sister-in-law had asked about my work at a dinner, I understood that something had quietly shifted, even if neither of us was going to make a ceremony out of acknowledging it. The Harrison portfolio deal closed 7 months after the retirement dinner. My firm received a substantial consulting contract in connection with the acquisition. My father's company was also part of the transaction, in a smaller capacity, and he handled it professionally and without the kind of maneuvering I had half expected. When the deal closed, he sent me a short email. Good work, it said. I mean that. I read it twice and then wrote back, thank you. I know you do. My brother did call. Not around a holiday. He called on an ordinary Wednesday evening and we talked for an hour about his job, his marriage, which was going through a period of difficulty he described with more candor than I'd heard from him before, and the small realities of his life that he had never previously thought to share with me. We talked about our parents in the way that adult children eventually talk about their parents, not with the freight of childhood grievance, but with something closer to compassion and the recognition that people are shaped by things that have nothing to do with us. I don't know what we are yet, my family and I. We're not close in the uncomplicated way that some families are close, the way that comes from years of steady proximity and shared rituals and a genuine, easy familiarity. We miss too much of each other for that. There's too much distance we can't walk backward across. But we're something. That something is new. It's still taking shape. I've learned, in the years since that retirement dinner, that the most corrosive thing about being overlooked isn't the hurt of it, as real as that hurt is. It's the story it tells you about yourself. The one that says, maybe they see something I don't. Maybe they're right to look through me. Maybe my place really is near the exit with the folding chairs. The night Delia Marsh walked through those hotel doors and said my name in front of 42 people who had never once asked about my life, I didn't feel triumph. I felt, for the first time in a long time, like the story I'd been telling myself in private, the one about who I was and what I was building, had been confirmed by something outside my own head. That's all it was. Confirmation. The work was already done. The work had been done for years. I had built it in early mornings and late nights and weekend calls and the particular determination that comes from having very little to fall back on because nobody in your corner is paying attention. You don't need them to see you to be real. But there is something, I'll admit, about finally being seen. There's a version of that night I used to replay differently. In the old version, I imagine saying something, correcting my father in front of everyone, making sure the room understood exactly who I was before Delia ever walked through those doors. I used to think that was what standing up for yourself looked like. I don't think that anymore. What I've come to understand, slowly and not without some resistance, is that the most powerful thing I did at that retirement dinner was nothing. I didn't announce myself. I didn't defend myself. I simply knew what I had built, and I let it speak when the moment came. That kind of quiet is not weakness. It takes something specific to hold that stillness, a decision, repeated over years, to keep doing the work even when no one is watching. Especially when no one is watching. I think about the years before that night. The early mornings in a one-bedroom apartment with a laptop and a spreadsheet, and a genuinely unreasonable amount of faith that the thing I was building mattered. Nobody in my family was asking about it. Nobody was cheering from the sidelines. And I kept going anyway, not out of defiance exactly, but out of something quieter and more stubborn than defiance, the simple, private conviction that I knew what I was doing, even when the people who were supposed to believe in me had already decided I wasn't worth the question. That's the part I want to say directly. You don't have to wait for someone else's recognition to make your work real. Delia didn't create what I had built, she confirmed it. There's a difference. The confirmation felt good, I won't pretend otherwise, but by the time it happened, I had already stopped needing it the way I used to. That shift from needing to not needing is the whole journey. And it doesn't happen because you get lucky, or because someone finally notices. It happens because you make a decision over and over to trust your own judgment, to keep refining it, to get it wrong sometimes and correct it and keep going. Intelligence isn't a fixed thing you're handed at birth. It's built through that process, through staying curious about your own work, asking harder questions, learning from people who know more than you do. Delia taught me things I couldn't have learned any other way. I stayed close to that relationship because I was honest about what I didn't know, and that honesty cost me nothing and gave me everything. And my father, I don't resent him the way I once did. He's a man who built his identity around a certain kind of authority, and I didn't fit the shape of it. That's a real thing, and it hurt, and it also didn't stop me. The hurt and the persistence coexisted. I think that's what people don't say enough about difficult families. You can carry both. The grief of not being seen and the determination to be something worth seeing. One doesn't cancel the other. My brother called on a Wednesday, not around a holiday. That was its own kind of answer. Some things only change because you stop needing them to, and somehow, inexplicably, that's exactly when they do.